hosting as well as presenting tonight. I have some additional individuals who will be helping me out with tonight's facilitation. Mr. Micaiah Whitmore. Micaiah is an ex-MBA student. He will be helping facilitate this process tonight. Not only is Micaiah a ex-MBA student, he's also an engineer at Shell and is in the doctoral program in strategic leadership at Louisiana State University. Also, I have one of my colleagues with me, Mr. John Myers, one of the smartest men that I know, who will be also helping to facilitate this process tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started with tonight's conversation. Up to this point, we've really had some very impactful conversations with Ambassador James Joseph and General Honore around leadership development and strategic leadership. We really looked at, from Ambassador Joseph's perspective, how do we create moral leadership and ethical leadership and spiritual leadership and social leadership? And then around the conversations that we've had with General Honore, he talked about organizational alignment and strategic alignment and how do we align our vision and our goals and our objectives and really creating and deploying those resources. So tonight we get a chance to put all that into a useful practice. So we're going to have a conversation around strategic leadership in times of crisis, that crucial conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward with what our opening activity is, and you'll get an opportunity tonight to participate in this opening activity. So I want to start with a very impactful quote by John Gordon. He says, "A positive team is created by a group of individuals who come together with vision, purpose, passion, optimism, grit, excellence, communication, connection, love, care, and commitment to do something amazing and create something incredibly together," right? So he really talks about how organizations have that sense of teamwork and that sense of passion. So the question for you tonight, and I want you to chat in, and my colleagues, John and Micaiah, are going to help facilitate this conversation. So what word best describes how you and your team will finish strong in 2020? So what's that word that will give you the fuel and the ammunition that you need to finish strong in 2020? I'm going to go ahead and reveal mine. Mine is my team and I are going to be resilient. The continued 2020. So what's that one word that will best describe how you and your team will finish strong in 2020? Go ahead and put those in the chat. Someone is saying united. Absolutely. That is tenacious. I like that one. Mission. That's great. So these words that really helps provide the focus that we need, the dedication that we need, the strategy that we need, and to a large degree, the passion and the infrastructure that we need to be successful leaders at this point in time. So Micaiah, why don't you read out a couple of those for us tonight so we can see what our audience is saying?
Sure, Doc. So we have, my team's going to finish committed. They're going to persevere. They're going to be visionaries. They're going to be strong, collaborative, connective, finish with a mission in mind, tenacious, and also last but not least, united.
Absolutely. We need all of those spaces in our organizations to really come up. We've been confronted with this global pandemic around COVID-19, and our leaders, sometimes our organizations have really been upended. So we definitely need that internal infusion of energy to move forward. So let me give you an idea of what tonight's conversation is going to look like. Again, I will be unpacking some anecdotes and some theories and some practices around strategic conversations in crisis. We're going to really focus on employee engagement. How do we get our employees involved? And what does that look like for our teams? How do we make sure that everyone within the leadership hierarchy and the leadership structure is involved in the process? How do we create compassion and empathy, and we create concern among our employees? And we're going to talk about care. And then we're going to have a couple of breakout sessions. So tonight is going to be about having that crucial conversation. You'll have multiple opportunities tonight to have those conversations with your colleagues that's been going through the same course with you. All right. And then we're going to have a wrap up by our Dean Donald Andrews. All right. So I have a poll question that's going to launch us off tonight. And our first poll question is, what's been a leadership pain point for you during this pandemic? I do a lot of coaching, and a lot of organizations are having some pain points within the leadership space. So what's been your leadership pain point? Go ahead and chat in for us. What's been your pain point? Is it leading remotely? Is it confusion regarding priorities? Is it a lack of short-term organizational vision? Is it fewer touch points with the team, or adapting to technology? Because there's been a lot of disruptions as it relates to COVID-19. So our organizations are still having to be strategic and really have those major check-ins with our employees to ensure that they're okay, that they're well, and that they're engaged, and really showing the care and the compassion that our organizations need. What do we have in the chat space, Micaiah?
So currently what we're looking at is now, I'm seeing a lot of being able to adapt to technology or lack thereof, confusion on priorities, and trying to explain our diverse needs. So when you look at that breakdown, probably looking at about 75% adapting to technology, with less emphasis on leading remotely and confusion on priorities.
Yeah, adapting to technology is a huge factor. It's been really big, specifically for us in higher education, having to one day be teaching in person and then almost overnight shift to Zoom and doing remote teaching and making sure that we are meeting quality matter standards has been very, very challenging. But organizations throughout America has really had to make some major shifts and some major changes as it relates to technology to ensure that our employees are still connected. Folks, it's about connectivity and making sure that our employees are still productive and that we're still meeting expectations within terms of our organizations. All right, got one more poll question for you. And during this poll question, we'll give you an opportunity to unmute yourself and have a verbal conversation around this. So the second question is, even though organizations are intentionally equipping leaders with tools that are valuable, what we're seeing here in the learning and development space and in the HR space is that we see leaders not putting those tools into practice or into use. So I want to ask the question for you tonight, and you can chime in either in the chat or you can unmute yourself. What's holding our leaders back? We are being intentional around, again, providing the tools, providing the resources, providing the wherewithal for our leaders to be successful. But yet in terms, we're seeing leaders not taking advantage of these tools. So what do you think are some reasons and some ways that, and some reasons that our leaders are not participating, and what's holding our leaders back for taking advantage of these developmental opportunities? Anybody care to unmute yourself? We got some folks chatting in. So what's holding our leaders back? Or let's make it personal. What's holding you back as a leader from not participating in these processes that people are kind of not wanting to be exposed or be vulnerable in these spaces? Lack of confidence or lack of self-confidence I see coming into the chat space. What else? Fear of the unknown. Absolutely, Dr. Marshall. Absolutely. The ambiguity around and then what about the accountability factor that's out here that's really, in some instances, not allowing our leaders to come forward and put themselves out there? Anything else you see out there, Micaiah, that we want to talk about?
Yes. So right now I'm looking at the recurring theme is having fear, kind of having a not understanding what the unknown is. Mr. Bryan put inertia, right? So people stay with the tools they know, which I think is that's a very great point. So a lot of recurring themes around being afraid, also fear the unknown, not having the support of just lacking that leadership confidence that's needed to move forward as well. So all good points within the chat space.
Absolutely. And it takes a level of confidence and security in order to put yourself out there. And I think organizations are responsible for creating that leadership confidence and creating that psychologically safe space so that our leaders can feel free to come forward without any fear of retribution or being embarrassed that I don't know. So I think for us as organizational leaders, we have to be intentional around having those check-ins and providing the feedback and the performance management tools that gives our employees the feedback to be successful. So here's the question: how can we better and further support our leaders? What leadership tools or what leadership development systems can we do moving forward to help our leaders be successful? How can we help leaders, or how can we help you? What's missing out here? And John, why don't you pick this one up for me? How can we better further support our leaders? We are a strategic leader development. I'm a certified executive coach. So I spend a lot of time in organizations developing leaders and creating that self-awareness and creating that empathy and compassion that leaders need in order to be successful. So what we have in the chat there, John.
Okay, we saw even from the previous question, I think we saw from Dean Andrews, the question was a lack of preparation. So I think a lot of times we assume just because we're equipping them with tools, we have to not only equip them, but we also have to prepare them as well. And so a big part of preparation, as we saw some of the responses in the chat room, is that we also have to be able to provide training as well as coaching for those leaders as well. So it's one thing to equip them with tools, but we have to prepare them and coach them as well.
Absolutely. And we have to be intentional around it. It takes
Mm-hmm.
know a leader to grow a leader and show a leader. So I think it's the organization's responsibility to find out and identify what those leadership gaps are and what those developmental gaps are, and create an intentional development plan tonight, folks, to ensure that your employees have the tools and that they have the resources, and we are intentional about it. That it's not something that automatically happens, but organizational leaders are intentional around having those crucial conversations and having those feedback discussions, and not just on an annual basis. I think that needs to be quarterly, to ensure that if an employee is off target, that we can provide him or her with the tools that he or she needs to get back on target. You know, if there are specific gaps in place, that we can address those gaps and not wait till the end of the review cycle when that employee could have turned, you know, the tide. They could have shifted and start performing in a better manner. So having those ideal check-ins. So the question becomes that how often are we having check-ins with our employees? Are we having those weekly check-ins? I was doing some work for an organization when the pandemic first hit and everyone was working remotely. And I asked this organizational leader, when was the last time you had a check-in with your employees? Basically, she had not had a check-in at all. And everyone was just working in silos and working from home, working remotely. And people were afraid, because they were afraid, number one, because of the virus. And then they wanted to make sure, again, that they were on point with organizational deliverables. Great conversation there, folks. So one of the things that I think is important for organizational leaders as we begin to have this conversation around employee engagement is, for us as leaders, we can't pour from an empty cup, right? So as Dean Andrews and some of you have said earlier, we got to be intentional around making sure that we create a culture of development, that we create a leadership development space, hence the Strategic Leadership Institute, because it is an institute that's going to provide the resources and the tools and the platforms and the webinars and the seminars and the thought leader conversations to ensure that our employees have those developmental tools. So folks, tonight, you can't pour from an empty cup. You got to take care of yourself first. So as they say in the airline industry, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first to ensure that you're able to meet the needs and the demands of your organization. So how I show up as a leader will determine how my employees show up. So if I show up optimistic, then guess what? My employees are going to show up optimistic. So if I show up hopeful, then my staff is going to show up hopeful. If I show up calm and you know, kind of collected, then my employees, because I begin to set the tone and the culture for what's going to happen within my organizational space. When I show up very empathetic or passionate and full of energy and with understanding, then that begins to translate to and downward in my organizational hierarchy. However, the corresponding reaction is, if I show up negative and judgmental, emotions are contagious. That stuff begins to spread throughout my organization, and it become to be toxic. And if I show up angry, and if I show up discouraged, and if I show up stressed and uncertain, and and I'm the leader and my employees are taking their cues from me, then that particular emotion will be transferable. Because as the literature says, emotions are highly contagious and they are transferable. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention how we show up, because how we show up will be a certain indicator as to how our employees will show up as well. So leaders, we got to take care of ourselves. So the question for you tonight is, I indicate this is going to be a very participative, interactive session. So what's in your leadership cup? We talked about making sure that you take care of yourself and you can't pour from a drained cup or an empty cup. So what's in your leadership cup? So let me just be transparent and vulnerable. In my leadership cup, there's a lot of empathy for people. So I have empathy in my cup. So why don't you guys chat in and let us know what's in your leadership cup tonight? So that latte there, it looks very good, very appetizing. So what's in your leadership cup tonight? What are you bringing to the table? What are you bringing to your team? Someone said love and compassion. I love that. Focus. We're going to talk about that just in a couple of minutes. Focus is crucial. Passion is, I see my MBA students are participating tonight. Passion is very important, Tremaine, because it is contagious. And when the leader is passionate and focused and strategic, it begins to translate throughout the entire organization. And we begin to really change the culture of that organization. I like what Mark Miller says in Chick-fil-A. He says, in order to have high-performing organizations, we have to have high-performing leaders. We need high-performing leaders who are filled with compassion, high-performing leaders that are actively listening, right? High-performing leaders that have that durability, that's able to bring the team together, that's able to reset, that's able to be agile, that's able to be compassionate, able to be balanced. So all of those characteristics are very crucial if we're going to get those organizational outcomes that we're looking for. All right. Very good. Thank you for humility, optimism, and positive energy. So there's a lot of information in the positive psychology space. So organizations are really looking at now, how do we create and navigate positive leadership? Positive leadership is crucial to the 21st century organization because it really impacts culture. Sean Anker really has this message he called the happiness advantage, that it's imperative that our organizational leaders, again, are aware and self-aware of our emotions, because when we are aware of our emotions, they really impact the people that we're leading. All right, let's go to the next slide. So in order to do that, folks, I've alluded to this before in previous conversations around vulnerability. This is a 21st century leadership topic, 21st century leadership competencies that organizations are looking for. Vulnerability by Brene Brown, it is, there's truly no triumph without vulnerability. It means vulnerability, she says, sits at the root of human connection. So it doesn't mean that leaders are weak. We are aware of who we are. We are aware of who we are. Vulnerability is a strength and not a weakness. In addition to it being a strength, vulnerability also is strategic. We are strategically, purposefully being open to letting our employees see within us, and that we're open to those conversations, we're open to those discussions, we're open to our employees knowing how we feel, and we're expressive about how we feel in a strategic place. It doesn't mean that one is submissive. That individual is definitely in control, and just because I am vulnerable doesn't mean that I'm not in control. It also encompasses the courage to be oneself, authentic. There's a lot of information, and the literature really talks about authentic leadership. I will be teaching a course in the future around authentic leadership, your true north in terms of who you are and where you want to go. So vulnerability really encourages us as leaders to be oneself. I like what Shakespeare says, to thine own self be true. And Socrates says, to know thyself. So really understanding authentically who I am, and there's no ambiguity about who I am. I'm clear that I am a very compassionate, that I'm a very empathetic leader, that I really want to see employees do well, and I'm about helping employees and students be successful. There's also within this vulnerability space, ladies and gentlemen, it really talks about being able to take risks, you know, and not just being so focused that I'm involved in analysis paralysis, that I can't make decisions, that I don't have all of the information, I don't have all of the data. And then it also really helps us in times of uncertainty, when we particularly don't have all of the information and all the answers, we still can move forward in a strategic manner. And then lastly, it's about being able to open up with that open exposure, being transparent. So the 21st leader used to be heretofore was command and control, but the 21st century leader now is about being transparent and about being open, and your ability to really open up and impact the lives of the people that we're leading. All right, let's go to the next slide. So Mark Miller, the Vice President of Human Leadership at Chick-fil-A, really talks about disengagement. So one of the biggest threats outside of COVID-19 to our American workforce today is disengagement. It is disengagement. When there is little or no energy within our organizational space, little to no enthusiasm, curiosity, or innovation, our organizations begin to decline. So what is workplace disengagement? Here it is. Miller says about 70%. That is a large number, ladies and gentlemen. About 70% of our workforce is disengaged, which means that 7 out of 10 people who come to work are really not at work. They're not curious anymore. They are not innovative anymore. They're not compassionate anymore. And then more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, they're not all in anymore. And we're going to unpack that just in a little bit for you continuously. All right, so here's some stats around disengagement and the cost associated with disengagement, about $483 billion to $605 billion a year, and productivity costs that we could have gotten even greater outcomes, greater awareness, greater productivity when employees are on board and are actively engaged in the organizational process. So let's talk about what engagement is. All right, so here's just kind of a working definition of what employee engagement is so you can understand. It is a deep connection and a sense of purpose at work that creates that extra energy, that burst of energy. And I don't know about you, the organizations that I work with and have worked with, they're looking for people who have that burst of extra energy, the people who are really able and willing to go that extra mile. And it also impacts commitment level within the context of the organization. So the question for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is do you feel connected to your organization? Is there a sense of belonging to your organization? Is there a sense of purpose around what you do on a daily basis? And then more importantly, Simon Sinek talks about understanding your why. Why do I work here? So it's not just for the paycheck, but it's something that's deeper, that's wider, that's higher than just that paycheck and just the 9 to 5. It is the sum total of who I am and how do I really start to connect in that space from a vantage point. All right, so let me give you a video that really kind of unpacks for you what a sense of purpose is. And we need a sense of purpose in our organization because when we're having coronavirus type situation, it keeps employees engaged in the process. So here's our first video for tonight.
In the 1960s, or so the story goes, Kennedy was visiting NASA. And he was on a tour of the facility, and not too far away, he saw a man walking down the hall with a broom and a bucket. He stopped the tour, he goes up to the man, and he says, "Excuse me, what do you do here?" And the man looks at him and he says, "Sir, I helped put a man on the moon." And you hear about that story, and it sort of makes you wonder, where does that sense of purpose come from? Where somebody that is the janitor of an organization, somebody that sweeps the floors, somebody that's responsible for restocking paper towels in the restroom, where does that type of a sense of purpose come from where he feels like he helps put a man on the moon? And it also makes you wonder, how do we create that type of a sense of purpose inside our organizations? There is this long debate between where does a sense of purpose actually come from? Is it something that the organization is supposed to provide for you, or is it something that the employee is supposed to bring with them to work? And there have been all sorts of debates and arguments and studies and research around this, but I think that the solution is that it's partially the organization and partially you, partially the employee. I think the organization has the responsibility to connect what the employee does, what the people there do, with the impact that they are having. So whether you are a janitor, whether you are a marketing manager or a sales professional, the organization should help you understand how the work you are doing is impacting the organization, how it's impacting the community, how it's impacting the world. They need to tell stories. They need to help you feel like you belong. They need to give you those opportunities to grow and learn and advance. But the flip side of that is also true. You as an employee, when you start working for an organization, you need to have a different mentality, a different mindset when you start working there. You can't just go to an organization and assume that the place that is hiring you is going to provide everything for you, that they're going to coddle you, that they're going to take care of you, that they're going to create this type of a Pinocchio's island where all of your worries and problems are going to disappear. That is not how it works. So as an employee, when you start working for an organization, I believe that we need to have that kind of that open-mindedness. We need to have that mentality that when we start working for an organization, we are going to try to contribute. We're going to try to make that impact. I think that type of a mentality, coupled with the organization's ability to help us connect the work that we do with the impact that we're having, is truly where we can start to see and where we can start to create purpose inside of our organizations. And if we bring those two things together, the organization's ability to connect what we do and our mentality, our state of mind when we go work for that organization, that we're going to contribute, that we're going to be open-minded, that we want to succeed. And also, we need to understand what it is that we want to do and why we are working for this organization. Is it just for the money? Is it because we genuinely enjoy the work? Both of those things are okay, but we need to have clear expectations of what that means when we start working there. So if we know what we want and the organization helps connect what we do to the impact that we're having, I think that's truly where purpose comes from.
All righty, folks. So he unpacks for us and gives us some strategies on how do we create that sense of purpose within the context of our organizations, because that's truly needed. You know, do employees feel like they belong? Do they feel like they're adding value? Do they feel like there's a sense of family and a sense of connection and a sense of purpose around our organizational structure? So I want to move forward now. And this question around engagement was asked to Mark Miller at Chick-fil-A, and they asked him the question about what does engagement mean at Chick-fil-A? So he indicated and was very impactful in his statement, in his response. It was engagement at Chick-fil-A is how much someone cares about their work, their coworkers, and the organization. So that whole engagement piece really begins to unpack and really tell us, do our employees really like the work that they do? And are they having those relationships, effective relationships with their coworkers? And are they connected to the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization? So here's what connection and engagement looks like from an organizational perspective. It really helps our employees, and some of you said earlier, to focus, to energize, and be enthusiastic. So this is what engagement looks like. It's persistence, folks. It is employees who are engaged they work harder. I mean, they work harder over long periods of time. They don't give up. You know, they're willing to be all in. They're willing to do what's necessary to get the job done. So when you think about engagement, and you can measure your own particular engagement as it relates to your organization, or have I been persistent, if we want to do kind of a rubric here. Look at the next construct. Employees who are engaged have initiative. They take action early without waiting for someone to tell them what to do. I know what my job is. I know what my role is, and I don't need anyone to tell me how to do my job. You know, I'm very open to feedback. I'm very open to those conversations, but I'm always willing to take the initiative to get the job done. What else is around engagement and what it looks like? So those employees that are engaged are very adaptable. change-oriented. They change very quickly. They're very interpersonal, and they are always about learning. They learn how to deal with each other and their fellow employees in situations very effectively, and they're creative at solving problems. So when you think and you measure, how do I get my employees engaged, and what does that framework look like? So let's look at another aspect of what engagement it is. So understanding their bigger picture, employees that are engaged, again, go above and beyond. Do you have any employees in your learning space, in your leadership space, that go above and beyond? And if they're not particularly going above and beyond, then we certainly want to ascertain and assess and really ask the question, are my employees really engaged? They see how their responsibilities impact the business. Again, they see that bigger picture. They begin to connect the dots. They're all in. And then the next aspect of employee engagement, so from a role expansion, they think broadly of their roles. They don't just see the bricklayer. They see that they're building an entire wall. All right. They often go a step further. So I want to know if any of you have employees that are really engaged at this point. They help others. They help to fix problems. They're strategic in problem solving. So as you can see, we need employees that are engaged. And we as organizational leaders, we have to come up with the construct of how we effectively help our employees to be engaged. All right, let's look at some levels of engagement. And we're going to talk about how Chick-fil-A begins to roll out engagement. So level 1 of engagement, this employee is all in. He is fully engaged. He's fully dressed. I know this ham sandwich really looks nice during our dinner hour. They're all in. They're really adding value. So you can ask yourself the question, are my employees adding value? Or particularly in terms of your own individual expression, am I really adding value to my organization? Am I adding value to my team? Or I'm just kind of showing up doing just enough to get by? So that second level of engagement tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is the employee who just shows up, right? Just basic, just not adding anything, just plain basic, does not add a whole lot of value to the conversation, to the team, to the organization's mission, vision, and values, and basically just doing just enough to get by. Those are those employees that we have to tap into and create a learning space for. And then look at the third level of engagement. Here it is, the employees that are burned out. So how do we protect employees from a well-being perspective that they're not toasted and burned out? These are the employees who typically complain and are jaded in their responses and to a large degree are unhappy about work, unhappy about life. And to some degree, these employees are very toxic and they spread that toxicity not only to themselves, they spread it to other people within the context of our organization. So those are the 3 levels of engagement as it relates to the employee. So Miller said at Chick-fil-A, when people are connected, care skyrockets. We need employees who care. When employees care, productivity increases, the customer satisfaction score increase, organizational finances increase. When we have employees who care, when people are connected. So the goal tonight is, what are those strategies we need to help our employees become connected? I want you to look at this video here of an employee, Jeremiah Merle, who at 20 years old appeared on Good Morning America because he's doing such an impactful job at Chick-fil-A that he went viral and folks noticed him. Listen up.
Good morning, sunshine. We are launching a new series this morning featuring people who bring a little sunshine into our lives. We're kicking it off with a young man who went viral after someone recorded him working at the drive-thru of a Chick-fil-A in North Carolina. So Steve Osen saw me. He went to meet him in person.
Hello, welcome to Chick-fil-A. Oh, how are you? This morning, meet the great guy in the Chick-fil-A drive-thru who's saying, "Good morning, sunshine." How may I serve you today? At the restaurant he works at in Wilmington, North Carolina, Jeremiah Merle is always bringing the joy.
Oh, we have American cheese, cold beer, pepper jack cheese.
American cheese.
Yes, ma'am, with the medium fry. And what was your beverage today?
And when 500,000 people saw him on the job in this video posted on Facebook,
How many would you like today? 2. We have that just for you. Oh, and how else may I serve you?
it made him possibly the most famous drive-through worker in the world.
You guys are awesome. 1 and 2. Thank an awesome day up ahead. All right, thank you. Chick-fil-A.
It was one of his regulars, Latoya Lyles, who recorded the video on her cell phone and made him a star.
I think that he was shocked that he didn't know that he was loved as much as he did. You know, sometimes we go everyday life just being us, not knowing the effect that we have on other people.
He works here with his brother and sisters who all sing this song.
This is Jeremiah speaking. How may I serve you today? It's a pleasure. Thank you all. Have a great day and enjoy.
His boss got emotional, telling us that Jeremiah is the sunshine in the day every day.
There's been times that I've come to work and I got a lot of things on my mind. He comes up, he knows it. Mr. Mike, it's going to be a great day today.
This 20-year-old hopes that someday he'll run a restaurant of his own.
It's a pleasure, everyone. A happy Wednesday.
He says his super extra positivity all started after one day when he was able to talk a customer out of ending her own life.
This never happened to me before. I had no idea how to respond. But I stayed calm. I was like, you know what? Let me talk to him and make sure this doesn't happen. Little moments like a smile can really change the day.
You know, we're in such an environment where everything's so negative and, you know, people are yelling at each other on Facebook and calling each other names. And so then to pull in through a drive-thru and have a guy be this cheery, you know.
We grew up on Superman and Batman and always doing the right thing no matter what. That's what kind of drives me. Because I always say I'm a superhero, but just with the invisible cape.
A superhero who is this morning's Good Morning Sunshine. For Good Morning America, Steve Osunsami, ABC News.
All righty, folks. So Jeremiah's story is impactful. So I want to ask this question, very inspiring, absolutely. So the question for us this evening is, which part of Jeremiah's story were you able to connect with? I mean, at 20 years old, I'm not certain that I was that amazing and able to create just my own personal expression and understand the impact of my attitude on an organization. Perhaps not at 20, I really understand now at my age. So which part of Jeremiah's story were you able to connect with? Again, in order to get those results, Jeremiah had to be connected to the organization, and there was a level of engagement that he needed, and his boss really was very supportive in him being the person that he is. So what do you guys think? What part of Jeremiah's story were you able to connect with? You can unmute yourself if you want to speak openly, or you can chat it in. Micaiah?
So we have one that talks about, Ms. Mary Johnson talks about staying positive.
Absolutely. Positivity is very important.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good.
I'm very thankful to be here with Southern University leadership in times of crises. Now, this is a multifaceted response. And I am very happy to say at 20 years old, he has already met certain peer pressures. He has already don't know how his home environment is, but he's able to overcome the negative peer pressures, I'm sure, that are around him of today. The general oppressions that are in the media, because his personality speaks that to his engagement with the community around him, because he embraces everybody well. So it seems like he probably does that in a multifaceted approach. Also, his resilience is innate. He's able to suppress the negative and realize that he's going to have a positive day by ensuring that others have a positive day. He has realized his vision. He mentioned a vision of owning his own Chick-fil-A one day. So his focus is geared towards his ultimate goal, and he understands what it takes in order to get there. He understands that he must start at the bottom, learn, and inspire others, be an example, and be the leader at the level he is in order to be able to actually become that leader one day. So he's operating in his vision daily. And all of it, I think, is a positive um, testimony to his actual personality.
Absolutely. Very well stated. I mean, he's self-aware. He knows his strengths, his developmental opportunity. He enjoys who he is. He's come into himself, and he's
Yep.
really has a very positive disposition about himself. Some other comments you're seeing in the chat, Micaiah?
Yeah, Doc. So it's a lot of great comments here. Talked about him having a vision, his sense of purpose, also his ability about the customer experience with such positive and energy. Talked about his sociability, also his passion, kind of that further development to own his own store. We have the self-motivation. And then one that I like is he displays joy, right, which is not based on circumstances, having determination to stay positive no matter what. So really appreciative for the comments there. Makes total sense in regards to his value proposition as far as being a young leader at the age of 20.
Absolutely, and not seeing himself just as an individual contributor, but a team contributor, and then really creating his own space and his own narrative in terms of his future, that his future is in his own hands, but as organizational leaders. So it's imperative that we show up in the right headspace, that we show up with the right disposition, that we show up with the right outcomes, because that definitely trickles down and it impacts the people, and we begin to really create a culture of positiveness. We positivity. We create a culture of learning. We create a culture of growth. We create a culture of vision, right? So all of those attributes really begin to help when we understand our role and how we can manage our emotions and how those emotions impact the people that are around us. So the next question is, and I want you guys to answer this for me. So how do we replicate that energy? I want Jeremiah working for me. I mean, they said whether it's hot or cold, he's out at the drive-thru and really creating a fantastic experience. He's taken ownership of this experience. So he says he's not going to let, because he's working at a drive-thru, limit his outlook of himself, that he really has a positive self outlook about himself, and he's really managing his space and he's creating his own narrative. And I don't know about you, but I believe that he's going to have that store. But if Jeremiah keeps on, he's going to have more than one restaurant. He's going to have a chain of restaurants, and he's going to have other people working for him, because he knows the power of engagement. He knows the power of a positive leader. He knows the power of a positive attitude, and it's critical that we begin to do that within the context of our organizations. All right. So how do we start to replicate that? What do you think we do? What conversations are we having with our employees? What are those crucial check-ins are we having? What's necessary to harness that energy and to make that energy spread, and that we make it scalable? So especially since it's positive energy and not toxic energy, how do we make that energy scalable? John, you want to answer that? You want to chime into that conversation, John? How do we begin to make that scalable?
Yeah, I think part of it being scalable is being able to, as we said, in terms of having that positive energy and using emotions as a contagion. So just as we saw in the video, he was inoculating those people who come through with positivity. So as leaders, we need to figure out how can he also inoculate his co-workers and everyone around him with that same level of engagement. And we have to make sure that everything that we do allows him to continue to have that joy and that engagement. Because as leaders, we need to see that everything we do will either continue his path in terms of being engaged or lead him to a path of disengagement. So we have to be intentional in everything we do as leaders to ensure that he and the people around him continue to be engaged.
Absolutely. And I think Dr. Franklin just put something in the chat. Micaiah, would you read that for me in terms of the culture and environment? Right. And that the leader has to be aware of how I'm showing up. Folks, we have to be aware, because how I show up will certainly be an indicator of how my team shows up. Even when there's trepidation, even when there's ambiguity, even when there's uncertainty, I still have to show up with a sense of calmness and being in control and not threatened by my environment. Okay, you want to read that from Dr. Franklin?
Yeah, sure. So she stated that the environment within the workplace must be consistent and supported by the leader. For example, Jeremiah's boss supported his being positive, which likely led his peers / coworkers to do the same.
And so being intentional around being positive. So how do we begin to ensure that we're having those check-ins with our employees, we're having those side conversations, that we're having, those feedback discussions when people are not on target, and perhaps having those gaps in terms of positiveness. So we definitely want to create that learning space for that. Let's move on to the last one. So what's one thing you could do, leaders, because this is about strategic leadership in times of crisis. What can you do as a leader to differently to better connect with your employees? What can you do to better connect? And Dean Andrew had a comment in the chat. You want to read that one for me, Micaiah?
Yeah, sure, Doc. So we actually had two left.
Okay.
One talked about the feeling of belonging to a place, as you said earlier, right? To be noticed and appreciated by the leaders when you work hard. Also, a good one by Ms. Adrienne talked about the 2020 vision. So sharing the positivity of others, no matter what the circumstances, is what you give to others. And Dr. Andrews talked about, and Ambassador Joseph and General Honoré have said, you have to share the benefits of the bounty created.
Absolutely. It's
Perfect.
It's a team effort. Teamwork makes the dream work. And so we as leaders, again, have to be intentional around those spaces. All right, let's move forward here. So this is that question of engagement and recognition and rewards. Someone just mentioned that. So 69% of employees, global workforce did an assessment, would work harder if they were better recognized. So recognition, folks, is important. Our employees want to feel appreciated. They want to feel valued. They want to feel belong to the organization. They want to have a sense of purpose. So recognition is important, and we're going to tell you how to do that. And I like what Dr. Maya Angelou says. She says, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. How you made them feel within the context of the organization. So the question is, you may say, well, this is very high touch, very high maintenance. Yes, it is, but we want to tap into those internal motivation systems and tools to ensure that we have those productive teams and we have high productive leaders within our highly productive organizations. Right? So it's a critical component. That's right. Very important for our leadership teams. All right. So I want to, at this point, show you a video from Rodney McMullen, who is the CEO of Kroger, and he's doing an impactful job at creating that sense of purpose, providing that affirmative culture, helping employees feel a part of the team, and really giving them some useful feedback. So I want you to enjoy this conversation from the CEO of Kroger.
Hello, everyone. These last few weeks, I just get feedback time and time again about how wonderful and fantastic our associates are. You guys are incredible. You are on the front lines every single day, working tirelessly to serve our communities and our customers when they need us the most. And to show our deep gratitude, we will provide hourly associates with a bonus of $300 for full-time and $150 for part-time associates. This includes hourly associates in stores, manufacturing plants, distribution centers, call centers, and fill centers. We're also expanding our emergency leave guidelines. This is a situation none of us have ever been in. And at a time when our customers and our country truly need us, you are there every step of the way. None of this would be possible without each and every one of you working together as one. It's so inspiring. I can't thank you enough for your dedication to our customers and each other. You inspire me. It is so impressive. A huge thank you on behalf of the whole senior team and all our communities. Thank you.
So what an impactful message and statement from the CEO of this organization. I mean, he is letting his employees know that they have been really troopers, done a yeoman's job around this pandemic, being first responders and on the first line in terms of this virus. So what message is he sending? I mean, how do you think these employees feel when the CEO takes out time to just show them that we appreciate you, you matter, you're valuable, and we thank you for being a part of our team. What is that saying? Anybody want to mute yourself? If you were working for Kroger, how would you feel if your chairman and CEO sent you a message of that magnitude? What is that saying? And how do we do this for our teams and our organizations? Anyone care to share?
Hi, this is Agnes Andrews. I'm just excited. I'm really excited to be participating in this program because I have been in sales all my life. And I say to my husband all the time, if everybody was in sales like me, it would be no problem because I know if I don't get out there and get it, it's not going to be gotten. And I try to encourage my staff to let them know that the buck stops right at their desk. They are the CEO of everything that they're taking care of. And I think it's working. Of course, we can always improve, but I have so frequently customers that call and say, you know, the girl that handled me, when I came in, she did a fabulous job. But I do try to incent them. I do try to encourage them, and daily I try and say to them, you know, who led the pack today with the production from yesterday, and make them know just how I try my best to let them know just how important they are to our team. And I've learned more and more just being on these types of programs and trying to be a team leader and let them know that they're leading the team also. So it's great.
Absolutely. Moving them from that individual contributor, Mrs. Andrews, to that team contributor, and then that competent manager when you think about level 5 leadership, and then just reaffirming the positive behavior. So we catch employees doing great things. We want to reaffirm that, you know, we don't want to just focus on the things that they're not doing well. We want to focus on the things that they're doing well. And we certainly want to reaffirm that. Dean said he put his money where his heart was. Read that one for me. So just a snippet of it, Micaiah. Go ahead.
So it said he put his money with his talk.
So he's walking the talk, essentially. You know, not just saying you matter, that you are valuable, but then to a large degree providing additional resources to make that happen as well. Absolutely. Anyone else care to share?
One other thing I would like to add. I try to model, we call ourselves, Allstate, we call ourselves the little A, and the corporate is the big A. So we say corporate is big A, the management of our team, we're the capital A, and then they're also the capital A, all kind of coining it in with Allstate. But something that I read in General Honore's book that stuck with me, and we use it so frequently in our organization, when he talked about that lead dog, how the lead dog was running and the other dogs followed, and as long as they could see the prize, they would keep running. And the first time we mentioned that in our meeting, I said, you know, we got a lead dog, and, you know, Diane, you're the lead dog, and we want to follow you and make sure we see that rabbit that's running with you. And so that's our office joke, you know, who's going to be the lead dog this week, and we're going to follow that lead dog to see that rabbit, and as long as we can see the rabbit. And I can promise you the things that you measure, you will achieve. And being in this industry that I'm in, and everybody know that Hurricane Zeta is lurking out, about to approach the Gulf. And I said to my husband this morning, if we don't get it today, we're not going to get it, because the month ends on Friday, and when the hurricane gets in the Gulf, we can no longer write new business, and we needed to write 3 more particular items in order to make our goal. So I, you know, told everybody we need 3, we need 3, we need 3. And the reason I was just a little bit short getting on the call was because we were finishing off our 3. And I said, those things that you measure, you will achieve. And so we've been measuring it, and I guess I'm on a high because I'm so excited that we got our 3, we got our goal, and if the hurricane comes and we can't write any more business this month, we've made our goal for the month.
Absolutely. Congratulations. And what gets
Thank you.
measured gets done, right? Absolutely. And then
Right.
bringing employees on board so that they can take ownership in the process, that the leader's not trying to do it by him or herself, that there is delegation and there's collaboration and then there's teamwork within the context of the organization. Absolutely. Thank you.
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Jackson,
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
quick comment. My view is, as a leader, how do we embrace our employees as entrepreneurs? Because basically, when we look at the people from Kroger, when we look at the guy from Chick-fil-A, part of engagement is having people bring their whole self to work. And so if they're engaged, they bring their entire self. And I think part of them bringing their entire self is feeling that they're an owner in the company. So even if they're not an actual owner, for them to bring that entrepreneurial spirit, when people feel entrepreneurial, they're more likely to bring 100% of themselves to work. And if they don't feel entrepreneurial, and if they feel that they're just to collect a paycheck, they're only going to bring a certain percentage of themselves to work. So we can make them entrepreneurs, and we're more likely to get 100% of themselves, because we know, as Ms. Andrews just mentioned, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're the owner of the firm, you're 100% in. So the question is, how do we get our employees to feel 100% in by feeling as though they're an entrepreneur within the company?
Absolutely. Just adding that value, being stakeholders, providing the context for them to grow, because people want to grow. Our employees want to grow. They want to go from position or rank to another rank, or just feeling a sense of purpose within the context of our organization. And that won't happen without having those critical conversations and being intentional around growth, being intentional around development, and being intentional around employee engagement. Excellent. Thank you, folks. Great conversation there. So I like this excerpt that I want to share from Good to Great. I like what Jim Collins says. He says it's not finance, nor strategy, nor technology. He says, folks, simply, it is teamwork that remains the ultimate competitive advantage, because it is so powerful and so rare. So this organization, this founder of an organization grew $1 billion in annual revenues. And this was a comment he had in this regard. He says, if you can get all the people in the organization rowing in the same direction, if I can get all the people on my team rowing in the same direction, if I can get all the people in my organization connected and feeling a sense of belonging and feel valued, he says, and I love this, it just speaks volumes to me. He said, when I get that space developed, you can dominate any industry, in any market, against any competition at any time. When we create that sense of team and that teamwork, because teamwork certainly makes the dream work, and really bringing our teams, and really folks, leaders, not going at it alone, but making sure that you are including your staff and giving them an opportunity, as John Miles said, to become those entrepreneurs, as organizational leaders need to do. And then creating the context, again, for them to grow, creating the context for them to thrive, and creating the context for them to develop. Sometimes employees just want to be asked, what is your opinion about this? Or what are your thoughts about this? Well, try doing this on your level and bring it back to me. I'm working on this. Give me some input about what you think would be kind of some of the next steps, or how we're going to fill in the gaps here. People want to be included in the process. So when we include others, it really helps them to be successful. There was a message in the chat, Micaiah.
All right, so Dr. Andrews talked about general honore, said he has made other general officers help others to reach their goals.
Absolutely. It's inclusivity. It's helping people to grow.
It's 7 o'clock.
And being intentional around it tonight, folks, as well. All right. So we're almost at our break. I want to talk about care, and then we're going to be halfway through. So I want to have those interactive discussion. That was kind of the opening. So what I have for you tonight, on the Law Center's platform, there's this care assessment. So we're going to assess and really do a deep dive on whether or not I am caring, or given an opportunity to create a team. Does my team come across as a caring team? So if you will, we're going to take a quick break right quickly at 7 o'clock, and we're going to come back at 7:10. So during the break, I want you to either take a picture of this, or it's going to be on the screen right there. Take this assessment and determine whether or not there's care, there's a sense of belonging, there's a sense of security, there's a sense of well-being on your team, and how well are you as an individual creating that environment and creating that space among your team. All right. Return back at 7:10, all right? But in the interim, I want you guys to take the assessment, because whenever we come back, we're going to break you out into teams, and there's some discussion pointers at the bottom of the assessment that you're going to be discussing in teams around. So make sure that you take the real simple assessment there, and at 7:10, we're going to come back and we're going to engage in some roundtable breakout discussions within our groups and our teams, all right? We'll see you back in about 9 minutes. Okay, everyone, we're starting to trickle back into the main platform at this point. You should have completed on your break the assessment tool around care to see how we are doing within the context of our organizations, how you're doing on your teams. Are we creating those cultures and those environments that exude care, that exude support, that exude well-being? And how intentional are we being around showing our employees that they are appreciated and that they are cared for? So at this point in time, what I want to do is go ahead and start to go ahead and disseminate you guys to your breakout rooms and your breakout teams. The computer's going to automatically do it. I'm not going to do it myself. So the computer's going to automatically do it. So let's start the breakout conversations. Let's see, we're going to do it automatically. And I want to have, let's have probably about 4 or 5 in a breakout session. All right, let's do it that way so we can make sure that we have enough time to really impactfully discuss your results on your assessment. And then at the bottom, we had specifically the discussion points around how can we improve in those areas, if it was between a 1 and a 3, and how can we start to increase connection on our teams, really beginning to become very transparent and very vulnerable in this space about what can we do differently to ensure, again, that our employees feel connected, that they feel engaged, and that they are part of our conversations. All right, so I'm going ahead and breaking you out into your discussion groups at this point, so you guys have fun, and we'll come back and have additional comments after we break you out. Okay, folks, we're starting to come back from our breakout teams and our breakout groups. All righty, folks are starting to join us back in the main Zoom space at this point in time. So I would like to just briefly have some feedback conversations around what particular conversations that you have within your breakout teams and how we're doing when it comes to showing care and being inclusive and allowing our employees to be successful within our workplaces. Are we allowing people to be included in projects on particular teams? Are we embracing strategy at every level within our organization? Are we welcoming that diversity of thought, that diversity of opinion to our team? So who wants to unmute themselves at this point and just quickly, briefly talk about what you guys discuss within the context of your teams? Just real quickly, a couple of you. I can't wait to hear what you had to say. Anyone cares to share at this point? Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, sure. In our group, Leroy owns his own business, and kind of talked about some of the things in terms of how he builds empathy in his team. And what I was kind of impressed by was he emphasized how he trains his folks on customer service, even though his business is more of functional people doing work. So he didn't talk about that part. It was more about how he relates to his customers and then how he makes them feel like part of the family. That really, kind of surprised me. And then some other team members mentioned coming here to Baton Rouge and kind of a lack of empathy, which we discussed a little bit in terms of probably a COVID local affected time. This is a weird time for us, so it's probably not unexpected they feel that way. And then we had some other good discussion in terms of how, another team members working through their organization kind of being split apart where they used to do a lot of in-person, how technologies help them overcome that part.
Staying connected and having those check-ins and making sure that everyone is okay. Absolutely, Brian. Great conversation there. Anyone else? Someone else was getting ready to speak whenever Brian started to speak.
Hey, Ron?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, in our group, we had an educator within the school system and one person who worked at a nonprofit. And we talked in terms of looking at our scores in terms of how the scores changed pre-COVID or pre-crisis versus the scores actually being higher during the crisis in terms of their leadership making a concerted effort to be more caring and to embody more of these principles during the crisis. So we talked in terms of what part of it may have been due to the crisis, number one, and number two, talking about how can the organizations sustain that, like the power of Big Mo, how can they sustain that post-crisis? And also talked about, given the fact that post-crisis, there's a new normal. So in terms of how do we get people to feel more engaged and have more of a sense of belonging, given the fact that we're going to need these people in order to adjust to what the new normal is. So we had a great discussion regarding those aspects.
Absolutely. Creating that sustained environment, creating that supportive environment that goes beyond where we are now so that we can continue to have those connections and continue to have that sense of belonging and continue to have that sense of care and providing the feedback that we need. So if we need to make any adjustments along the process, we can definitely make those adjustments and we can continue as leaders provide the support that our employees need to be successful in the long term. Okay, one more group that cares to share?
I'll share.
Okay.
We had a diverse group as well. We had military, academia, and corporate. And the thing that we agreed on was that inclusion needed to exist within the organization, incorporating meetings so that everybody has a part at the table, a seat at the table. And we also talked about open communication in regard to respect and being open-minded. and embracing diversity of thought as well as perhaps person. And that pretty much resonated between all of us in regard to our.
Excellent, excellent. Dean Andrews, did you want to share anything in that regard?
Yes, I wanted to say that that was me and Makisha were the only one in the group. Someone came and they saw the dean and they exited the group. I don't know who that was. But we talked about the leader being willing to risk chaos, as Ambassador Joseph indicated, especially when we're talking about diversity. While people say the benefits of diversity outweigh the costs, from a leadership and from a management point of view, it's much more difficult to manage a more diverse group. But the benefit is you get the correct answer, you get a better answer, a better outcome when you have a diversity of opinion and diversity of thought. But it is more or less somewhat, you have to be willing to risk, as Ambassador Joseph said, you have to be willing to risk chaos in terms of being a leader versus a manager.
Right, and we can manage that chaos through those quick check-ins and being strategic in the process and to ensure that employees are all in. So even though perhaps it may be chaotic, as Ambassador said, but we certainly can manage that chaos to get those organizational outcomes that we need by strategy. Because strategy definitely drives that structure. Absolutely, Dean. Thank you so much. Okay, folks. Well, that gives us a wrap up in that space. Hopefully, you guys had an opportunity to take the deep dive to see how you are scoring as it relates to care. One of the most important factors in the 21st century is that employees, again, want to be included. They want to be valued. They want to be at the table. They want to be involved in the decision-making process. And we as leaders have to be intentional around being inclusive and making sure that our employees understand where we're going. So holding the information perhaps is not the best strategy for inclusion, but really creating that spirit of curiosity that really drives the innovation that we need for success really is going to help our teams be successful. So thank you tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to really talk about leadership in practice. So we understand that we need mission-driven organizations, but how do we do that? How do we do that? We do that by having those inclusive conversations, by having those weekly, if not bi-weekly check-ins or monthly check-ins, and being strategic in the process so that our organizations can be high productive. And we create those high productive leaders by intentionally developing them. We have a strategy for development. We have a strategy for growth. We have a strategy for next step. And again, we're intentional around it. So this Strategic Leadership Institute that the Board of Supervisors helped us to create really is strategic in identifying where the gaps in our leadership journey. We all have opportunities for growth. We all have opportunities for development. We all have opportunities for improvement. So we're going to be intentional around making sure that we overcome what those developmental gaps are. All right, so at this time, we're going to take just maybe a 1 minute break, just 1 minute so I can transition, and then Dean Andrews is going to come and close us out tonight. So let's take a 1 minute break, and then we're going to transition and get Dean Andrews all set up for his closing comments and activities, and we'll be right back. Okay, Dean Andrews, we're ready for you at this point. We're already got you all geared and ready to move forward. You can go on with your presentation at this time.
Okay, let's give Dr. Jackson a round of applause for putting together his lecture for tonight. I think he did an excellent job. I think more or less he sort of brought things together in terms of the previous two presentations by Ambassador Joseph and General Russell Honore. We have one more presenter, Dr. John Butler, who's going to be coming to us from University of Texas at Austin. He currently holds many endowed chairs in entrepreneurship at the University of Texas, Austin. Now, entrepreneurship and leadership, some may say, well, what is the connection? And so what I want to do here is sort of build a bridge between leadership and entrepreneurship. And I think John talked about that in terms of being entrepreneurial on the job, as well as talked about the new normal. So can we go to the next slide, please? Looks like it went away somewhere. Okay, so I'm going to go through these rather quickly because I know I'm between you and your rest of your evening. But John talked about the new normal, of what economists and business leaders talk about, the new economy or change. When the rate of change outside the organization is faster than the rate of change inside the organization, then the end is near. And I guess this is somewhat prophetic in that this is former CEO Jack Welch of General Electric. And we know General Electric probably didn't change as rapidly as it needed to. It had been around for over 150 years on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but now it's been delisted from the Dow Jones in terms of the difficulties that they're having. So basically, we have to be aware of change. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when we talk about vision, this gentleman is Booker T. Washington, and he wrote his famous autobiography of Up From Slavery. So you're talking about an individual in terms of the best way to predict the future is to help create it. So he went from someone who was illiterate to being a university president and helping to create the future. So basically this shows you that no matter where you are, you can rise to the occasion and become a great and profound leader. And so in the book that Dr. Butler has written, Entrepreneurship and Self-Help Among African Americans, he really highlights the contributions of Booker T. Washington and says that African Americans can basically succeed and be successful even if they're in a situation where they have to rely on themselves or self-help. Next slide, please. This is a pictorial that shows you the changes that have taken place in the American economy over the last 200 years, going from 90% of the individuals being on the farm to now we have less than 3% of individuals working in agriculture. We see that industry expanded and has more or less contracted to some extent. And we see that services are where most of the individuals in society today work. So we've gone through a tremendous economic transformation. So change, there's nothing new about change. We've been experiencing change for over 200 years. Next slide, please. The thing that's new that we are experiencing and is causing a lot of concern, especially in terms of leadership in our society, both business, political, as well as in the public service sector, is we have now an accelerating pace of change. The rate of change is increasing faster than it ever has. So we've gone from the agricultural age, which lasted for thousands of years, to the industrial age, which lasted for hundreds of years, to the knowledge age, which lasted for tens of years. And so I've experienced all of these ages. I grew up on a small cotton farm in the Louisiana Delta, one of the poorest places in the nation, and really didn't realize it. And so basically, we can go to the next slide. So we've warped from the knowledge age to what is now the creative age. So we talk about design thinking. We talk about creativity, of being creative. And we talk about implementation. And so the thing today is that we have benefited from these changes as far as the economy is concerned, but all have not benefited equally. And actually some have lost ground. So we have to figure out how can we prepare people for the creative economy and how it is rapidly changing the way we work, live, and play. So next slide, please. Another thing is that in terms of the agricultural, industrial knowledge and now the creative age, we have what are referred to as brilliant machines, Deep Blue and Mr. Watson. And these machines can now, what we are talking about is artificial intelligence. So the machines are saying, can I help you think? Machines have been used to help us in terms of brute force and power, but now we're talking about artificial intelligence. And how are we going to deal with artificial intelligence? What does this mean for leadership? What does this mean for individuals in terms of jobs when they may be threatened with being replaced by robots? Let's move to the next slide, please. One of the problems this has caused is that we look at income inequality and wealth inequality. So the income share to the top 10%. This graph looks at 1917 to 2007. So back, if we go back to 1920, the top 10% had over 50% of the income. Then after World War I, we had more income equality that took place in society. Beginning about 1980, we see more or less that the income has become distributed much more unequal. The top 10% now have over 50% of the income, and this graph is continuing to increase. Move on to the next slide, please. So how do we prepare individuals for the society of the future? How do leaders lead in this type environment? What we see here is basically income and college education. We have the lowest quartile, where about maybe 10% of those individuals get a college education. We look at the top quartile of income earners, about 55% get a college education. So therefore, there is inequality because of the inequality in education. So we've got to solve this gap in terms of income inequality. Go on to the next slide, please. So what this shows is that the income inequality is being generated by differences in educational outcomes. So this graph shows that if we go back to 1973, and those individuals, we're going to normalize it in 1973, everybody has $100. Given their income at that time, less than high school may have been making $9,000, whereas college may have been making $25,000. We run the graph forward and we find that the individuals with less than high school have lost. They now are at 85% of what they were earning. High school is barely treading water. Some college barely treading water. So it's been primarily advanced degrees and college educated that have seen increases in their income shares. Next slide. So basically what we're saying here, planning for the future. The single most important thing to remember about any enterprise is that there are no results inside its walls. The result of a business is a satisfied customer. The result of a hospital is a healed patient. The result of a school is a student who learns something and puts it to work. The talk you hear today about adapting to change is not only stupid, it's terribly dangerous. The only way you can manage change is to create it. By the time you catch up with change, the competition is already ahead of you. That's Peter Drucker, known as the father of business management. Move on to the next slide, please. Role of the university in entrepreneurship development. So we're saying basically that the universities have a role in terms of academic programs, research, and outreach to the community, such as what we're doing here in terms of this leadership program within the Leadership Institute that's being developed. And we hope to do more of these programs to help the community move forward. Now, 21st century institutions of higher education, role in economic development. I'm just going to read the first one there at the top. Embed economic engagement innovation, and entrepreneurship across institutional missions. So I want you to underline that word there, entrepreneurship. So we're saying that 21st century institutions of higher education have to be entrepreneurial and help individuals become more entrepreneurial in terms of what John was saying when he said we need individuals on the job who are entrepreneurial. Next slide, please. University Center for Economic Development program, that's really what's helping us to fund our institute, is that we have a grant from the Economic Development Administration. And I'm going to read the last point down there. The EDA supported University Center program is specifically designed to marshal the resources located within the colleges and universities to support regional economic development strategies in regions of chronic and acute economic distress. So we're trying more or less to outreach to the community. Next slide. So I asked the question, what is entrepreneurship? And so entrepreneurship is creative destruction. That's Joseph Schumpeter, who basically came up with the whole concept of organized study of entrepreneurship. Identify an opportunity without regard to the resources currently available. Another one is a way of thinking and acting that is opportunity obsessed, holistic in approach, and leadership balance. So that leadership balance is what I want to key in on. Let's move to the next slide. The entrepreneurial process. Entrepreneurship process will create a better world. It's just not about new companies, capital, and job formation, nor innovation, nor creativity, nor breakthroughs. It's also about fostering an ingenious human spirit and improving humankind. As Jerome Honore said, business is not about making profit, it's about solving problems and making life better for all of us. Move on to the next slide. And this is from Jeffrey Timmons. I had the privilege to study under Jeffrey Timmons at Babson College, where he was an endowed professor. And the Timmons model of the entrepreneurial process, first of all, opportunity recognition. Second is resource acquisition. Third is team development, as we have been talking about throughout this entire process. You've got to develop the team. Next slide. You've got to be able to connect the dots. That's what entrepreneurs do. Next, please. You're going to have fits and gaps. The thing I want to point to here is leadership. An entrepreneur has to be a leader. You have to go out more or less and sell the plan. You have to be creative. You have to be able to communicate. So this whole process together is known as the entrepreneurial process. It's leadership driven. The entrepreneurial process, opportunity driven. You have to do your economic analysis, your market studies, determine whether it's profitable or not. There are three types of, go on to the next slide. Three classic types of life cycles in the business. We have the high potential firm, the established firm, and the lifestyle firm. And so basically when we're talking about entrepreneurship, say in the minority community, and I apologize to you about this particular graph, but if you look at, say, the first column here, and the third row, it's average gross revenue or receipts. For African-American businesses, it's about $58,000. For non-minority business, it's $552,000, 10 times as much. So we've got to do more in terms of establishing businesses, especially in the African-American community, in terms of self-employment, in terms of employment of individuals in those communities. So that's a big issue that we have to address in terms of business and entrepreneurship development and leadership development. This graph talks about business growth stages in terms of startups, helping people to become startup, helping them to grow, helping them to mature, and helping them to stabilize. We can move on to the next slide, please. Resources. We're talking about how do you find the resources, because there are a lot of venture capital funds out there. So there's money, a lot of money chasing too few great ideas. So we've got to be able to find those resources. It may be better to minimize and control the operation rather than to maximize and own. What we're saying, if you're weighing on in terms of owning the business, you want to be able to control the resources, not necessarily own them. So you need to be aware of bootstrapping and creativity possibilities as far as resources are concerned. Again, the entrepreneurial team, the key ingredient for success is the lead entrepreneur, quality of the team, and commitment and determination of that team, as we have talked about tonight. How do you get everyone to be entrepreneur? Leadership. And as Dr. Jackson has talked about, he mentioned Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote the classic book in business today, Good to Great. And don't let good be the enemy of great. You have to know when to adapt and change. That's what a leader does. IBM, General Motors, and Kodak all had a near-death experience because the leaders may have become too comfortable. Maybe they were not willing to understand that the personal computer was going to replace the mainframe. Small, fuel-efficient automobiles were going to replace gas guzzlers. And digital photography was going to replace film. So you have to be willing to cannibalize your own operation in terms of where industry is going in the future. And that brings about what is known as, go back one please, level 5 leadership. The level 5 leader is that leader that has the mission of the operation ahead of his or her own personal mission. And they've got to be willing to experience or work in chaotic environments to get the right people on the bus. Once you get the right people on the bus, in the right seats on the bus, they will figure out where the bus needs to go. So where and how the bus is going to be driven is critical in terms of business operations, in terms of political operations. And so therefore, this is the crux of leadership. So next time, Dr. Butler is going to talk to you about entrepreneurship. That's his wheelhouse, but we all have to be aware that it's the leadership within entrepreneurship that's driving the bus. So I hope this will help you. And if you have a chance, you might want to look at his book. It's called Entrepreneurship, Self-Help Among African Americans, a Reconsideration of Race and Economics. He goes back to the future. He talks about the level of organizations that were created at the end of the Civil War to move African Americans out of slavery into economic opportunity. So I'll stop at this point, answer any questions you may have, and then turn things back over to Dr. Jackson.
Any questions for Dean Andrews? Very impactful conversation there, very strategic, very theoretical. We certainly got the gist of what you were saying from an entrepreneur perspective. Any questions at this time? If you have any, you can unmute yourself and we'll allow the Dean to field those questions. We got to thank you, Dean Andrews.
I put everybody to sleep. So.
Dean Andrews, this is Brian Dixon. You know, on the discussion of economic disparity, you know, I think one of the hugest drivers to balance that is entrepreneurship. Yet in the last 20 years, I think due to the regulatory environment, that it's really kind of discouraged entrepreneurship. Do you have any comments on that, sir?
It's 8 o'clock.
Well, you have to continue more or less to be persistent if you're an entrepreneur. In other words, you've got that dream, you've got to be passionate about that dream. You've got to be willing to endure hardships. Now, regulations, it depends on the type of regulation. I mean, some regulation is beneficial. And we see right now with Facebook, Amazon, and others, that's concerned that maybe they need regulation so that because they may have had anti-competitive policies. And you go back to the Sherman Antitrust Act when basically Exxon, well not Exxon, but Standard Oil was regulated and had to divest itself of companies. The same thing with Microsoft and others and Apple. So basically what we're saying, we want to make sure we have a level playing field, and we don't want monopolization. We want to create opportunities for individuals to have the ability to go into business and not suffer from monopolistic practices. So all regulation isn't negative or isn't bad.
Right. There's a question in the chat. Micaiah, would you read that question for Dean Andrews, please?
Yes, let me unmute myself. So what advice would you give to a level 5 leader, especially when the mission of the organization is not clear or shared by others?
Well, that's the purpose of a level 5 leader, is basically to make sure everyone understands and participates in shaping the mission of the organization, and everyone buys into the organization, and everyone benefits from the outcome of the mission itself. So it may mean that, as an example, I remember when Lee Iacocca, who was with Ford, and came up with the Mustang, and he thought that he should be awarded at a higher level beyond that what was available at the institution. So he moved from that particular corporation, became president CEO of Chrysler. But at one point, he thought everything was about him. And so therefore, you have to realize that you have to carry others with you. You have to carry the organization forward and the goals of that organization. It doesn't mean you're going to be the most popular person, but basically you're going to move the mission of the organization in terms of being world class at whatever more or less are the strategic goals of that particular organization. So you have to have passion, you have to be world class in your particular industry, activity, and you have to have a revenue engine that's going to drive the operation. So leadership isn't easy. And as Steve Jobs once said, if you want to make everybody happy, sell ice cream.
And then perhaps they'll complain about that was not their favorite flavor as well. So there's a chaos around what's their favorite ice cream as well. Any other questions for the dean at this point? There was a question around level 5 leadership. I will provide level 5 leadership, the framework for level 5 leadership. I will post it to the platform that anyone who needs it and wants it can have access to Collins's level 5 leadership. A great read, a great read. Any other questions at this point?
Dean, this is Brian Dixon. Would you please say again the name of the book of next week's speaker?
And he's written several books, but one is called Entrepreneurship and Self-Help Among Black Americans. And then the other book is Leadership, the Military Way. That's not the exact title. Let me see if I can find the exact title here. But John was in the military, and the book they wrote was All That We Can Be, Black Leadership and Racial Integration, the Army Way.
Thank you, sir.
Where he talks about how the military has basically created leadership and used HBCUs as one of the graduates of HBCUs as one of the ways to change the leadership focus in the military. So I'm just preparing you for John. I want you to push him hard because he can talk about leadership. He can talk about entrepreneurship. He's got a lot of great connections in terms of UT Austin, in terms of the business incubator, and being willing to share some of those ideas there in terms of businesses, in terms of how we develop entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments before we get ready to shift to our closing point tonight? Again, Dean Andrews, we want to thank you for an impactful presentation around entrepreneurships and the importance that entrepreneurs are leaders, because it really everything rises and falls on leadership. And we certainly want to create that space and the opportunity for our organizational leaders and our entrepreneurs to continually to grow, thrive, and develop. And again, we want to thank our audience tonight for your participation in the breakout teams and the breakout groups. It was a lot of conversation going on in those breakout teams and those breakout groups. So again, thank you. And we're looking forward next week to Dr. Butler, who's going to come and really do an impactful job and really lay out the foundation for entrepreneurship in the 21st century. Dean, yes, John.
There's a question in the chat room in terms of are we going to provide resources or discuss resources for minority entrepreneurs in the future? And I'm sure that can be part of our discussion over the next 2 weeks.
Absolutely, definitely. We'll make sure that that particular question gets addressed and we provide those additional resources for our audience members. Any closing comments, Dean?
Well, again, I want to thank everyone for their participation tonight. Again, I think Dr. Jackson has done an excellent job, and you too have done an excellent job in terms of the chat. Just don't know why people left the chat room when they found out I was there. So,
yes, sir.
Well, I hope this program is meeting your expectations, and we'll do a survey at the end. So basically, we want you to participate and give us your ideas of how we can move this overall program forward.
Exactly, Dean. So we're going to be doing some lunch and learns. We're going to have some activities during the morning hours, noon hours. So we got a lot in store for you. I have convinced Dean Andrews to we're going to co-present on empathy as a part of emotional intelligence. So get ready for that. Hopefully we'll be able to bring that to you guys in the spring semester. So really a lot of information, again, to help you as leaders be successful and really help our organizations be successful, and that we can create these high performance teams, organizations, and leaders. Have a great night, folks. We'll see you back for our final 2 sessions starting next week with Dr. John Butler. Have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you guys next Monday. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Good night.